I was watching Lawrence O'Donnell last night, and he had a guest on that is a Pulitzer Prize winner, a journalist, writer, who was outlining the global attack on this pandemic, coronavirus. And while, of course, I understand the tribulation and God's killing machine, and he's using this as an instrument to kill people. That's what he is doing. But I do think in terms of insightfulness that this particular journalist has some very interesting ideas about, and it's something that you ought to think about in case you've not come all the way over here with me, that God's just going to kill till he gets tired of killing. Then after he stops killing with the coronavirus, he's going to start killing with something else. But until you come over here with me with that, look at this and you might find something interesting. In fact, importantly interesting, that you've not heard by anybody else say about how to attack this pandemic. So Mr. Engineer, roll, I think it's clip number 2.
We have 2 stories tonight to begin with that are actually the same story. The suppression of information about the coronavirus pandemic by Donald Trump and his administration. That's the one story. We're hearing a lot of discussion of tactics, but no discussion of goals. Joining us now is Laurie Garrett, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist covering global pandemics. She is a former senior fellow for global health at the Council on Foreign Relations. Laurie, you make this point about the distinction between tactics and goals, tactics and what is your ultimate strategy. And it's the ultimate strategy that you're not hearing.
Well, anybody who's ever been in the military knows the difference between strategy and tactics. And most people in sports know the difference between strategy and tactics. But somehow, when it comes to national policy, we've completely eliminated that distinction. So all the arguments, the discussions, the debates that we hear across America, whether it's angrily storming your state capitol to protest lockdowns or its demands for test. These are all just tactics. They're not, what is your long-term strategy? What is your strategic goal? And we don't have a national strategic goal. We have a president's goal, get reelected. We have a Wall Street goal, get the economy going again. We have certain public health institutions' goals of control the epidemic in my community or in my region. But the real only goal that matters, the only goal that really gets us anywhere as a planet and as individuals is let's get rid of this virus. And if the goal is let's get rid of the virus so it doesn't become a new permanent feature threatening humanity as HIV did, as Ebola has, as other viruses that have emerged in the last 30 years have successfully done, then we need a coordinated global strategy. And the United States needs a national strategy. And instead, we're going precisely in the opposite direction, where all the burden for strategic planning and for judging which tactics best feed which strategic goals is placed on the shoulders of mayors and governors who are weighed down by strapped budgets, by years of inadequate hiring in their public health ranks, by the tremendous hysteria in cities that are overwhelmed by patient burden. They're not in the best position to come up with an international strategy or a national or perhaps even a regional strategy. And so we're blindly, testing over here, test. What kind of test? Test for what? What are we looking for? When I test, am I imagining that every single employee walking into my factory will have been tested before entering the door? Am I going to do that every single day, every third day, every fifth day? You don't have to go very far before you realize this is chaos. This is not get rid of the virus. This is short-term, come up with a tactic that lets me reopen a school or reopen a business. But the virus will still be out there and it will still be coming back in wave after wave in the future. Are you going to shut down and reopen and shut down and reopen and shut down and reopen forever?
Look, Lori, what does a strategy of getting rid of the virus look like?
Well, there's really only one way to do that. That's have an effective vaccine that is specifically designed not for use in wealthy countries, but for use in the whole world, which, in my book means one dose, because the complication of tracking everybody down a second time for a booster dose is overwhelming. In my book, it means it can't require refrigeration because a whole lot of the planet doesn't have electricity and refrigerated vaccines go bad. It requires creating a profit motive scheme of some sort that brings the industry to the table without imagining the kind of profit returns they usually want from pharmaceuticals. And that means coming up with agreements with the World Trade Organization and with the trade-related intellectual property agreements and all sorts of instruments of international law. And then finally, it means mobilizing a global response, internationally led, internationally supported, getting into some of the toughest places on earth, getting the Taliban on board, allowing vaccination in Afghanistan and Pakistan, getting Islamist groups on board in the Middle East, getting all sorts of insurgent groups on board in Central America. I mean, you've got to have an all-out political and social and legal and business commitment that is led from the highest levels in order to achieve this. And we can't even get the darn Security Council to hold a meeting about COVID.
Now, I don't want to step back from the spiritual. The fact this is a tribulation, and it's not going to be stopped. No matter how well defined a goal may be, or how strategic a plan may be laid out, you're not going to stop it. It's God's plan. All right, so that's. But having said that, if we can, and I don't want to put that on the shelf or step back from it, but having listened to what she says, just in the event that you don't believe that, she says some, I thought, some very credible things. One is that in order to cure this coronavirus, there must be a global approach. Now, we understand that several major developed nations have put together a pot of money to be able to come up with a vaccine. America's not a part of it. But you can't just discover how here in America, such as some sort of drug that will cure people here in America, but leaves Africa and India, South America, other parts of the world uncovered by that particular. Whatever happens, the drug must be made available on a global basis. And here's the reason why. Because you can cure every American of coronavirus with a vaccine or with a dosage. And someone comes in from Kenya, travels or comes in from Paris, who's got it, and starts the process moving all over again. So it's got to be a global, the concept of discovering this needs to be under the World Health Organization, number one. Number two, she says, that it must be a one dose. So in other words, so whatever pharmaceutical company or research clinical people that come up with the application of the vaccine, it must be a one dose event, that they must figure out a way how that once you dose the person, it's like smallpox or some other, you only have to shoot them with it once and that's it. It can't be, redosing or every flu season you got to take a new flu shot. It has to be a one dose event. Because, of course, you can't go tracing people down, 7 billion people every year to give them a new dose. That, will be difficult. And then the other thing, it must be non-refrigerated. That is to say that whatever, because many of drugs are stored in refrigeration cylinders, and then they are brought out and injected. So it obviously has to be in some sort of tablet form where one can take it, because in many third world nations, you don't have adequate refrigeration. So I thought it was pretty brilliant. I thought it was brilliant of what she said in terms of her application, because none of those things are being done right now by America or the World Health Organization. It is pretty much every nation is scrambling to fight for themselves, to find deliverance for themselves. And I think that, and then she says, but it not only just should be made available to people who we are in agreement with, but it must go over to Afghanistan and over Kabul and make it available to the Taliban. You got to get the Taliban boys on board, or the insurgents down in South America, or some of the freedom fight, not freedom fighter, but some of the Islamic boys in the Middle East. You got to get all of them and get them vaccinated too, because eventually they're going to cross paths with people that have been in nations where it has not taken place, and starts the problem all over again. So I thought it was a concise way. I've never heard anybody be quite that concise in terms of the thinking and organized as well as that. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.